This is The Change Physician, episode 106. Welcome back. I am Melissa Cady, the Challenge Doctor, with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, and we are here with the Change Physician podcast, and we love to deliver some interesting topics, especially in this coming up next 100 episodes of more of a personal development approach or slant for physicians or physician allies. So today our episode is going to focus on a quote that I came across, and our title is Big Pleasures with Small Things. And to be a little more specific, the quote I came across was, "He who is not satisfied with a little is satisfied with nothing." And this is by Epicurus, who was born in 340 BC and is a Greek philosopher who apparently has the wisdom to recognize that this is a problem not just of those days, but also of our current age. And so I think, in the most recent year or two with the whole pandemic, I think it's made us slow down a little bit to maybe recognize these small things that maybe we were so busy that we didn't really see. Hopefully, I can only hope, but I would love to, I know that you mentioned, Kevin, the little bit of this origin of Epicureanism, or you want to talk about that definition?
Really, real briefly, because the first thing you said, Epicurus had this quote, and I was like, oh, wait a second, that sounds like Epicureanism, which I have always heard more around in the cooking kind of realm. And this is Epicureanism is a school of philosophy, obviously founded by Epicurus in 307, so he wasn't that old. Thinking about that, it was based on this idea of really these small pleasures, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Yeah, it's interesting that he developed, it's a branch of hedonism. And one thing I want to kind of emphasize is a lot of these terms from these ancient philosophies have sort of been bastardized and misunderstood. When we go back to the source, there's a much greater appreciation of them. So you think about ancient Greek philosophies, you got Epicureanism, you have hedonism, and then you have things like Stoicism, which is pretty popular in the entrepreneurial community right now. And hedonism, I think in some ways has a bad association. Like you mentioned off air, like, oh, Jamaica, hedonism, right? Because I think there's a resort down there called like hedonism or something.
Yes.
But Epicureanism is actually a branch of the idea of hedonism, which is an idea of kind of the pleasant pleasures, present pleasures, if I can even talk today. And he had divided into pleasures of the body, involving sensations of the body, such as eating delicious food, which I think is where the food industry has kind of pulled us into this. But not just food, but anything that's sort of bodily oriented. This, sunlight on your skin could be a pleasure of the body. Then there's pleasures of the mind, things like joy, fear, pleasant memories, anticipation, or a remembrance, fond remembrance on things. Mm-hmm. And these ancient philosophies have such valued wisdom because the human condition has not really changed that much. If you kind of go back 3,000 years to our current situation, everybody's kind of thinking about what is it that makes life worth living. And so as an adjunct to this topic of big pleasures with small things, I think you can get a lot of pleasure by going back to old thoughts and seeing how they apply into the now. Now, what I particularly like about Epicureanism in this, big pleasures with small things, and the fact that you can't, with the full quote saying that if you can't enjoy the simple pleasures or the small pleasures, you're not going to enjoy the big pleasures. There's an act involved with that, where being appreciative, aware of these small things, means you're more likely to become even more aware when the big things occur. You're not going to miss them. Mm-hmm. And if we can appreciate those small things, feel in many ways that when something larger occurs, you're probably going to appreciate it even more than you would if you had not. Like, how often do we accomplish something, and then the first thing is, well, okay, I did that, but what's next? Or and I certainly do this all the time, where I'm like, you immediately downgrade the accomplishment. Mm-hmm. And simply say, hey, people say, oh, you did that. And you're like, well, it wasn't a big deal. It really wasn't a big deal. What I really need to do is this, or I didn't do that, or you're seeing it, that deficit, rather than what was the that thing that you accomplished. So, you went up a small hill and people are saying, hey, you went up a small hill, and it's like, well, there's a big mountain over there. I didn't conquer that mountain.
Right.
So other daily things is just the simple act of being in the moment, which I think is reflected in a lot of Buddhist thought as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you present and enjoying this particular moment? Because if you're not able to receive pleasure out of this now, then the future now, because we've done some thoughts about future and present perspectives and things, you're not going to enjoy it in the future realistically.
Yeah.
So I think it's I love that quote. I'm glad we're talking about it. But those are some of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, and in fact, you just made me think of some things that came to mind as you were talking. This idea of being in the moment, which I'll say I'm very guilty of not, because I'm very future oriented. But I think when you combine that with self-deprecation or not celebrating oneself or having self-compassion on top of not being in the moment, you could see why it's real easy to have this fleeting sense of accomplishment where it's like, okay, you get this done, but you're like on to the next one because the demand you put on yourself is so intense. And I think as physicians, it's not uncommon for us to be achievers, and you're used to being around those kind of people all the time. So it almost reinforces that kind of behavior of, okay, next, and the pressure on you even to do that, because you really can't stop and dwell on anything because you got your test the next week or the next day. So I think that there's a propensity, I'm not saying everyone, but you and I both can admit that, maybe not savoring the moment, not being present with the moment. If you're not doing that, then you're missing out on the opportunity for joy. And so you keep practicing that ritual and you ingrain that kind of behavior pattern. And even the science shows the more you do the same thing, you run those neural pathways, the easier it is with less effort to keep doing the same thing. So when I think about the medical field, the situations where we can be very frustrated with the medical system. So obviously that can be deter you from the joy that you can experience in your medical profession. Despite that, I've found that when I focus on connecting with that patient in front of me, instead of just going through this ritualistic, like, got to get it done, got to get through my day, as much as you want to achieve that and get to the end of your day, is sometimes some of those joys that we can get is just connecting with other people. And if we can try to hold on to that and feel, I know this is kind of maybe some suggestions that we wanted to share at the end, but this is where I recognized how I can change my joy for the day, is if I really savor that interaction and make it really meaningful and valuable for the patient in front of you. Just even like 5 minutes of your own devoted listening to somebody, it's incredibly rewarding. And those are the moments that made me realize, holy cow, like I'm missing out on so many little moments of feeling meaning and joy, and I don't want to let go of them, even if the system's trying to push it out of you. So even if it is just for a few minutes, you talked about getting out in the sunshine and feeling, that sensory experience. And I feel that when I'm outside. I love getting outside. There's many opportunities for that, but it also can happen within the medical profession itself and how you connect with your patients. And I know that most of us already know that that's where the system is broken, and we don't get paid for spending time. We're not getting encouraged to, or actually sometimes getting pushed out of that connection. So when you were talking, it made me think a lot about that. But from a personal standpoint and your achievements to even become a physician, I mean, how many of us really savored it? I mean, some of us are better than others, but I could tell you that you almost have to create the opportunity to celebrate, and not to have to throw a big parade, but it's how you're feeling inside about yourself that creates a different sense of joy. So if you can't savor those little things, then how on earth are you going to expect to feel this joyous thing? When you became a physician, that it's very fleeting. It goes away. You're on to the next thing again. those are the first things that came to mind. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, because we're kind of talking about being in the present moment, but we wouldn't even in a lot of that with interactions with others.
Mm-hmm.
But we can even sort of narrow that down into these micro moments as well. Mm-hmm. So whatever your job, you can find a simple joy in the day-to-day interaction. So like you and you were talking about in anesthesia, and it made me think of the joy in a smooth intubation. And that's a little thing.
Yeah.
But there's something, I mean, I'm just reflecting on it, kind of makes me feel good that when you got a great visualization and you're passing the ET tube smoothly through the cords and it just goes perfectly, that's something to savor.
Yeah.
To move into, this, again, we're sort of mixing the Western and Eastern, but thoughts are thoughts, and we're not, neither of them, it's really interesting the overlap between the two, but just savoring the sip of your morning coffee and taking a moment to do that.
Or my water.
Or your water. These, being more aware and appreciative of those little small things allows you then to recognize, or I should say, one, it does a couple things. You are necessarily searching for the big wins all the time anymore. Mm-hmm. So removes that sense of lack, I would say, in some ways. Two, when a new win or a new experience occurs, you're more likely, you've practiced that muscle over time so that you potentially have greater appreciation of that moment, and then just makes the now so much better.
Yes.
So I think if I was going to recommend any ways to start applying it, is you can sort of break down this into, you can, like what I like about the Epicureanism one. So, right, they have the pleasures of the body and the pleasures of the mind. Well, how would you increase a daily pleasure of the body in focusing on small things? Well, like we mentioned, if you drink coffee in the morning, anticipating that whole action through it, the smell of the coffee, the taste of the coffee, the warmthness that comes through, the kind of after effects with it. Taking, small little weird things that you wouldn't do. Well, a sunny patch on the floor. Like I used to do have you, lying on a sunny patch on the carpet and the floor? That is such a small thing, but oh my God, what big pleasure. And you know why the cats do it, right? It's like, that's like a small patch of heaven. Makes me want to go lie on the floor.
And they didn't need a podcast for that. They knew.
Yeah. What do we call that? A patch of the patch of heaven, or
patch of warmth? I don't know.
Patch of warmth. So what I'm going to put forth is, since this is the Change Position podcast, is I think we should put a challenge out there for individuals in here, where we say, okay, well, what is the small pleasure that you're going to do, or the small thing that you're going to get like pleasure out from today? And you can pick out if it's going to be a pleasure of the body or a pleasure of the mind. And what mine for tomorrow is going to be the coffee thing. I've enjoyed my coffee, but I am going to enjoy the hell out of that cup of coffee today. And I'm doing a small pleasure with mine right now, because now I'm already anticipating what that coffee is going to be like tomorrow.
Very nice. Well, two things. One is my little challenge, and I just love the fact you use challenge, and I always like say, see change within challenge and the challenge doctor. Anyway, I get all excited about this change and challenge stuff, but because it's a constant. It's a constant thing we have to do as humans, is this thing. But the one thing I want to savor is I love going out to I have some things growing in my backyard that hopefully they'll thrive. But one of them is like a sweet leaf herb. And I love the fact that a lot of the stuff I grow, I literally can go up to it and snap a piece off of it and eat it. And it's super sweet, a natural herb that's very sweet. And so just savoring that, and of course I have to walk outside in the sunshine and grab a little herb to eat, and I literally can eat like a salad out of my backyard. It's kind of cool. So that's something that I'm just glad that I've kind of started putting these pieces together, and so I guess I'm giving myself a pat on the back for trying to create this for myself. So I'm quite proud of that, but has a long way to go. But the other thing that you made me think of is that how we can, if we are minimizing ourselves or minimizing our little achievements and we're not savoring them, what is it that you think you'll be doing with others around you? And so I've recognized this in myself. If you minimize your achievements, if you minimize, and I don't mean just in a self-deprecating way, but like more of just like not finding joy in the little things, then many times we can project onto others that same kind of approach. And you may not, it may be easier to celebrate other people. Everyone's different, but sometimes it's easier to minimize other people's achievements or little, joys that they could have because of the way that you treat yourself in your own life. And so I think if it only brings more by bringing joy within yourself and savoring those things, I think it becomes easier, like you said, the more you do it, by an extension, offering that same kind of joy to other people, not just because of the way you feel about yourself, but recognizing the small joys in other people. So I think it's a gift that you not only give to yourself, but it's something I think, I don't have the data to support it or tell you exactly, but just from the intuition and what you see in humans in general, is that if you find a lot of joy in yourself and you're happy with yourself, you tend to express that more with the people around you. So I don't know. That was my initial thought of what you said. Why are you laughing at me?
Well, there's always so much more to unpack in
Unpacking
there.
that.
And
so is this something that should be another episode that you're thinking of?
I think so too. There's two important things I think in that. One, when with the big pleasures and small things aspects, is if you can appreciate others, you get big pleasures out of the small things that somebody else does, and you can be appreciative of them. Mm-hmm. That's definitely going to reflect back from you. The second topic, which I would like to say for another episode though, is how comfortable are we in accepting praise? And then what does that actually infer, or how does that change the interaction? Because there are some important connotations to that, but I do think that's a whole separate episode there.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, in light of that, you want to take us out and kind of tail us off?
Sure. So I wanted to thank you all for listening to the Change Physician podcast today. I am taking great pleasure and the knowledge of you listening to this and hopefully getting some good, useful nuggets as well. And this appreciation that I'm having with my co-host here, the stupendous Dr. Melissa Cady, who is always very appreciative. And I get major big pleasures with even just small interactions with her. So it's always a pleasure. For everybody else, I hope you get some big pleasure out of a small interaction by going to thechangephysician.com. And whether you're a physician or physician ally, taking a couple moments to sign up there and being appreciative of that. And we will see you on the next episode.
Take care.